Well, thank you, Nick. That's a lovely introduction, and I'm very pleased to be here with everybody. I've actually been able to follow some of this week. I've had chances to pop in and out and listen in the background sometimes too, so it's been great input. And I'm actually really pleased to be following Lila and Owen's project too, because it makes a lot of sense. This is a good programming. Thank you. So, which is a super project. So I'm going to share screen now, and hopefully reach into straight away into my presentation and put it onto full screen. Is that good for everybody? Can you see?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
great. Good.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So let me get rid of that a bit so I can read the slides. Wonderful. Great. So here we are. I'm going to talk to you about connected bodies, and what I actually work under this research title of the Internet of Bodies, which was my impact case study for the REF this year, and I've been working on at Greenwich for 5 years. But really the topic I'm working on in a practices research sense is connected bodies, and I'm going to focus more on the practice side today. And so therefore, what I'm hoping through this presentation is to take you through to hang on a minute. Really sorry, hang on 1 minute. I'm just going to stop sharing. Now, okay, take you through to the virtual and physical hybrid body side of what I've been working on, and the hybrid space. So as Nick said, I'm the Reader in Digital Immersion at University of Greenwich, and today I'm going to share you some pioneer and topical references in relationship to the physical self and our emerging data selves. And I'm going to link it into some thoughts, lived experience to date on our future and multi-selves, and some positive and negative issues in relationship to the convergence of our physical bodies and our body-led technologies. Now, this has really been indicated by the rapid advancement of virtual physical hybrid environments that we've seen happen in this last 15 months. The future world of learning, working and teaching and socializing has come to face us straight away. So coming from a practice-led background, I've actually been working since the early 80s at Middlesex University, and with a focus on dance and voice. And that's where I also did my BA in performing arts. And both art forms are using the body without any other tools attached. And that's the interest that I always have, what we can just do with our physical bodies, our living bodies, and the enhancement of our lived experience. I've been part of several collectives across this time, including the New Dance Collective, and then into the experience of doing the Body Data Space Collective. And some of you will have known the Shinkansen Collective from before that. And actually the Shinkansen Collective and Body Data Space have focused entirely on live presence, telepresence and virtual presence, slightly obsessed with connecting across time and space to reach a place where our physical bodies and our data selves merge and seamlessly blend. And where we focus at this point, the last kind of 15 years or so, has been on the body as the interface, where we finally got to, I feel. So I'm going to base this talk on 3 key things: looking at our identities, and looking at our diversity and our hyper enhanced and multi-sensory sides of ourselves, and also looking at our creativity, our collaboration in co-created space, our immersed and connected selves, and our innovations, and that are now much more, hopefully, diverse and inclusive. And I'm going to focus this on the body as the interface.
Ghislaine, are you sharing any slides?
I am. Can you not see?
We can't see them right now. Sorry.
Right. Okay. I've got to go back a bit here.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I thought something was wrong because I suddenly stopped seeing. So I was going to share again. Right. Okay. Let's try and get this right this time. I must have pressed a button.
Yes, we can see your desktop. That's good.
Right. So I'm going to press play again and hopefully not lose you. Is that okay?
Yes, we can see that now. Thank you.
Do just shout, Nick, if it disappears again. All right. So I was talking about body data space. I think I've covered this slide completely. Looking at our work on telepresence and virtual presence. Body and data in virtual and physical space is probably the quickest way to describe it. So And this was the slide that I had up when I was talking about identity, collaboration and innovation. So apologies, I missed that completely. And I'm now here. So we're not too far in, so that's fine. So this is a slide which actually for me is a bit of an illustration of what I believe the 90s, the rapid evolution of digital technologies into the mainstream, kind of forgot about the body in many ways. Technologists and many creatives kind of saw the body as obsolete. And of course, it was really exciting because we were setting up a massive network of knowledge of the brain. Collective intelligence exchange was what filled the 90s with that buzz. And somehow body knowledge got lost in there. And by the end of the 90s, this dominant popular metaphor was our brains attached to the technology. The body was invisible. And I think for me, that's been a thing that I've been kicking back against for many years, coming from a dance background, etc. That our body and its non-verbal communication modes, our gestures, our motion, our facial expression is full of knowledge exchange opportunities and full of gains in learning about each other. The body is imperative to our intelligence. I really do believe that. And I always see the body and mind as a kind of figure of eight between, our heads and our bodies working together, absolutely in sync, totally equally needed. And in dance, that's totally true. You actually, when you're moving in a dance work, a complex choreography, your body actually thinks faster than your brain, or you couldn't do it. So yeah, actually, of course, in academia, this is rarely regarded in this way. It is about the brain and the thinking, and the body intuition or body feelings are not considered to be seriously there for other than for conjunction as such. So my view here is a bit tongue-in-cheek because it's a bit in opposition to the early transhumanist movement, this aim of downloading your whole brain into the net for prosperity. And today, in a weird, strange way, here we are as talking heads again, confined to video conferencing by this pandemic, and the body is still left out. And yet, even though this whole pandemic is about the body, is sadly about the body. So the base of my work across this time has been grounded in this core understanding that we actually must really put the body at the center of this, and that liveness, the living, breathy, sweating, gesturing body needs to be central to all digital developments, and that we must create these technologies. We create them as living beings to support and enhance our lives, to connect and expand us beyond and above our physical lived experience, and to enable us to move forward and extend our living essence. Oh, wrong way, sorry. There we are. Here are the research questions that I've been working with. Oh gosh, so sorry. Here we are. Right, sorry. Next one here. For example, for most people in life is that we dance and sing. We may only dance at weddings. We may only sing the national anthem at the football match or whatever once a year. However, dance forms thrive across the world for mass populations in all cultures, from traditional to folk dance to ballroom to line dancing. Rave dancing. Here's a few examples. The dance marathons in the 20s, I think, is a really interesting example, actually. Post-war immersion into the dance and these competitions where people actually were madly dancing to get money. And also singing in choirs and groups. This is a collective embodiment, and I'm very interested in how this happens, because what it does is it enhances us. It takes us up into a kind of transcendence, a joyfulness, and it creates a kind of collective vibration between us. So here we are actually now looking at the hypersensory body. And for this, I'd like to focus a little bit on these interfaces for my dance practice, where I experimented with interactive tools of all types from the early 90s, triggers, sensors, reactors, generators, motion capture, and particular telepresence, which I'm going to come back to. Most of the things that on this chart are actually sensory examples on this diagram are in our lives now, and or in various stages of digitalization in our lives, meaning that the data transfer, these little tiny dots all over between the body and these points, to and from our bodies is well advanced now. And in fact, most of you transfer a lot of this data from the mobiles in your hands, your voice, your visuals and writing, of course, also your location. And we will often, and I do, use my fingerprint or touch or facial recognition to access my tools. So here we are looking at the telepresence side. These are the 3 research questions that I've really been working with since the early 90s. Can we exist as both virtual and physical bodies simultaneously? Can we build a presence and trust into that blended state of virtual physical body? And how will our own blended representation of self and that of others be extended, protected, and maintained within this blended state? And this is the inquiry I've been playing with in my practice and actually through my research and also through my presentations, including the radio work I do. And it's become obviously very key to this year. The last year, myself and the other collective members, it's been a very bizarre scenario, like some kind of horrendous universal research group suddenly appeared for us as we watched the same issues as we encountered in the mid-90s, particularly in this baseline dislike of many of us for facing ourselves within mediated and performative environments with others. So anyway, back to some of the little bit of history. Here are a few slides which just show the work in the early 90s we were doing, multiple workshops across Europe and around the world, bringing together dance artists of all types with video artists, creative technologists, and we innovated. We innovated with projectors and cameras and created baseline remote stage connectivity from around 92, actually, between dance studios, enabling us to see and hear and dance with each other in different spaces. And we realized there was many advantages to this exchange. And so after doing these complex things, because there was lag and there was lots of technical issues, of course, but we felt there was an articulation that we could do of the positive side of the audiovisual connected spatial environment, crossing time zones, and is by magic suddenly being able to dance with each other at a distance. And these photos actually show a lot of mapping that we were doing, a lot of two-way notation so that both ends would be going at the same time. And a lot of collective experiments taking place, but we were not the first in the world and certainly not the only, because we couldn't have done the two-way without it. And eventually by the mid-90s, we were starting to find others to work with in different countries. And one of those was an amazing artist called Helen Sky. She worked in a company in Melbourne called Company in Space. And here she talks about herself within virtual. She probably spent more time in cyberspace as a body than anyone else in the 90s. So where do flesh, fragile bones, senses and perceptions fit into the new geographies of the late 20th century? And that's her talking in 98. And actually we moved on here to going to do our telepresence work, looking at the full body in telepresence space, but particularly at the skin, at touch and at feel. And we spent a lot of time creating works which actually needed a lot of experimentation and exercises in navigation and orientation, finding where you are within space when you're linked to another space or even possibly to 2 other spaces, and you have the virtual mix happening. Eye contact, which is still pretty much impossible, except in the top level video scenarios of the business world. And actually, we've learned to reach out to each other, to actually extend our energies beyond our fingertips. We talk about looking at like 6 inches, 12 inches beyond our fingertips to actually send energy through these screens to each other. We were working on digital intimacy. We were working on trust, virtual touch, building a kind of tele-intuition. And we were working the skin into the web. A lot of it was very much like live television. Camera people working with us, mostly often cameras people who had originally been dancers or were still dancers. Very visceral, very dynamic, very performative. Very much about gesture, very much about extending the body interface. Macro, micro, we called these ones, these little experiments. And our skins became the interaction canvas as we connected 2 or 3 distant stages for dance performances, and extending our knowledge, our body knowledge, and sharing creative ideas and exploring creative solutions. What we did realize, even by the mid-90s, was that telepresence was a very, very helpful tool for intercultural exchange and knowledge exchange and skills bartering, and not just for dance, of course. And it was a brilliant creative shared environment for community and public realm interventions. And of course, for my work, where I really focused was on the re-examination of identity, of self and other, and of live presence, and the expansion of our senses into this realm. But we were also aware then also the distance bridger, which dissolves so many boundaries, did enable us to use less flights and to have a cleaner eco footprint. And I just wanted to point out that the telepresence community in the 90s was very aware of this. And I feel quite proud of us all for working on that too. Here is one of the most amazing, fascinating distant connections that was made. And this was Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinovich, who I'm sure you will have heard of, and it's called Hole in Space. And it was, well, actually now it's called the mother of all video chats, with two huge, bigger than life displays, one in New York, one in LA, went up overnight. And the next day, with no explanation, people just found them and crowded around these screens, pointing at each other, dancing, laughing, saying, "Where are you? Where are you?" This amazing 1980 Hole in Space. And actually, it's worthwhile going to the YouTube video to have a look at that. The excitement was immense. And this is really very clearly linked to Roy Ascott's work too, where he was aware from the late 80s, if not earlier, his first telematics work was in 83, that the quantity of data and the telematic networks worldwide was, going to become, and was already becoming, ubiquitous, and that we really needed to understand in human terms and from the point of view of culture and creativity, what is going to be the content of this? What is the content for us to use within these ubiquitous networks? Now, with body data space, we always talk about what we call a collaborative share space, where the I joins the we and exchanges knowledge, skills, ideas, and beliefs, where you're an active participant, distributed content comes together, multi-access points, multi-data output puts. And this is collective network collaboration. And this is where collective intelligence, both brain and body, can flow between us. It's used in many citizens' movements, the open democracy movement, the voice of a citizen, neighborhood, in redesigning surroundings, etc. Of course, in a way, Facebook and all the social media platforms are kind of a collaborative share space in this way. And socially, many people worldwide have stayed in close touch with family and friends for actually a long time now, since Skype, 2005. And FaceTime, etc. And you have to remember that distant workers to families, I know in Estonia and Latvia, the laptop with Skype is actually on the breakfast table and has been for years for kids to see their dads on the oil rigs for weeks at a time. But as we move into a post-COVID world, this shared space has expanded, as we know, into a much larger use by a mass of the population. This move into a kind of virtual physical blending. And it's this collaborative share space, this hybrid platform of the future that I'm interested in, and how we actually will see this emerging for work, learning, and sharing, to actually take us into an access that many people have not had before. Yes, due to mobility, yes, due to distance, but also economic and care duties have stopped many people joining into things. So I really would like to push forward for the hybrid space. And I show here a hybrid space, a virtual physical hybrid space that we made in 2012 with the National Theatre. It's an EU project, and it hung as a virtual world between London, Paris, Brussels, and Istanbul. And we actually were connecting there, what we call local to local connectivity. And you used your full body. It's a spatial surround sound, human gesture and motion capture. I'm going to play a tiny bit of this in the background, talk over the top of it. Here, actually, we can see Sasha, this is one of the dancers, seeing instantly her avatar within this large virtual world and seeing others there too. This has been pulled by Connect and by Telepresence connections. And you enter that virtual world physically in a box, actually, which actually then you stand within with nothing on your body. There's no wearables, there's no headset, there's nothing which restricts you from moving in your free, normal way. And this box transports you straight into that virtual world as an avatar, where you join the others in the 3 or 4 other countries. Now, Me and My Shadow was really quite a special project. We had a very, very big interest in it, of course, this joint avatar world. And we had lots of different elements that I could go into for ages now. But I think we didn't do badly here, actually. There was a lot of good kids and everyone using it. National Theatre is a great place to do this because, of course, you don't just get the straight arts audience. We got lots of people coming off the South Bank in the Olympics here. So Me and My Shadow points to a much more interesting future where the boundaries between the real and the virtual disappear. Sometimes you're in virtual space, sometimes you're in the real world, and you cannot tell a difference. Collective reality was the next larger scale piece we made in 2016 with University of Greenwich and Future Fest by Nesta. This was a huge space again. It could take 300 people, this one, much bigger than our boxes, and actually was a generative audio-visual space, but the audio and the visuals were only generated by the motion of the participants in the space, the public. And that was actually insistent on touch and hugging and coming together and working together. So it's about experiencing togetherness. Tech to good to enhance our lives and build trust and intimacy. And here, of course, quite strangely, this is what's been not allowed this last year. Now, with Internet of Bodies, we have been looking at this collaborative share space. And in the next decade, what we're going to see in that collective co-creation, collaborative share space is the convergence of many, many more advanced technologies, many that you've been talking about this week. Now, in this conference, there's people who are working with these technologies and bringing some of them together. But I think within 5 years, we're going to see groupings of these in 5 or 6 working together as collaborative share spaces, as metaverses, as virtual platforms, as new spaces for us to enter. And in that, we will be using our biometric data and we'll be using our AI, and AI will be in place on it. So holograms and VRs and everything around us. And even today, for many corporates, the physical staff, maybe some back in the office, but they've still got people working from home. And I think that the hybrid environment is here to stay. In universities for modern learning, online, VR, virtual worlds and face-to-face is great for all students. And we're seeing a very fast move towards these advanced hybrid platforms. Business has invested incredibly in this, of course, in the last year. Even our things like MST and Zoom, which we're using now, will increase amazingly, actually, in the way that they are upskilled, in a sense. New popular platforms such as Clubhouse and High Fidelity with proper spatial surround sound, virtual worlds like Vital for upskilling and extending your hybrid methodologies, and a lot of new touch and gesture tools, such as sheets of haptic actuator arrays, which are linked to the internet and where you'll be able to feel and touch each other through screens at a distance. Gesture is big. Tencent, the Chinese company, has just invested 50 million in the British company Ultraleap around the Magic Leap investment gesture tool. Metaverses and avatar worlds are emerging and are expanding rapidly. Festivals and galleries like Kadaf and Mokhtar, new digital-led museums all around the world, they are hybrid, and it's about hybrid access. And we're developing ourselves a digital intimacy AR app at present with an Innovate UK grant. These are all complex back end, but they need front ends which are simple for intuitive and easy use and access by many people. These are it's really important point. This is Masaki Fujihata, actually, the big intermediate artist who actually has mentored me a lot, and he's drilled this into me, complex back end, simple front end. Here we're actually doing workshops with VR software artists who this is at the SAT in the Dome in Montreal. And actually here it's been amazing working with these software artists to help them understand that when they're coding, what it means to do spatial coding, spatial generative work in coding, and helping them to actually have the physical experience of what they normally are just sitting there coding at their computers. So with these shifts come big shifts in identity. And I'm really interested now onwards about the immersive environments and the use of our biometrics and data and what our responsibility is for ourselves in the ongoing world. Should we be working towards a personal data ownership and an opt-out, opt-in scenario for all uses of our body data? Because body data is being gathered around us at a rate of knots. Biometric harvesting has increased significantly the last 2 years. And that's due to surveillance cameras, of course, but it's also due to COVID-19, globally through contact tracing apps, through passenger location, through vaccine passports, through all of our digital medical information that's been digitalized madly in different countries in different ways. And details of biometrics now contain much of our body is fragmented into different places all around the world, and it's held by sometimes by government, sometimes by the police, sometimes by corporates, depending where whoever grabbed it, whoever harvested it off us. This is a lot of medical detail from all these different things: fingerprints, heartbeat, breath, particularly gait and posture and gesture I'm interested in, and how gaze and facial recognition are being pulled through. And actually, that is where we've got to really focus, I feel, for the next part of immersion in audio and visual, the immersive environments that we all love. The immersive environments are part of human nature, from, you know, whether we were making events in caves, whether we were making, in cathedrals, or whether we're actually in domes today. The public debate needs to be about personal biometric assets, and we need to understand that actually, alongside with processing by AI, our mass personal information is giving away a lot about our moods and emotions, our feelings and our beliefs. And this is very valuable to governments and policing and businesses. And actually, we need to really understand what's happening to us. And we know we've got GDPR, but it doesn't do very much, actually. We don't really know who owns this stuff, who has the rights to own it, and what is the ethical usage of our own personal selves. We are all unwilling participants, or willing, in the data harvesting side. And actually, the decisions we make in the next 5 years about how immersive environments actually do affect our identity and our selfhood and our self-responsibility are the decisions that will move into our children and our grandchildren onwards. So we do always make a case and advocate for the personal rights dashboard, where, yes, of course, we share our data for good, for social good, just as has been needed for the vaccine push today for this incredible complex COVID situation. But actually, that the rest of my data would be in my name, and that my data self would be tethered to my physical self. And I would decide which businesses would use it, where and what I put my data into. And within this, we need to look at the avoiding pitfalls around algorithmic bias. They're baked deep into the base of programming. Diversity and inclusivity is key. How we actually enable an access to a diverse range of people is really problematic, because the data bias at the moment in the big data pools is partly because the data in there is from the average of the Western developed world. So it really doesn't actually cover everyone at all. And yet an average, a norm is being made out of a very, very, particular grouping of us who all have access to equipment and use data. So we need to be able to extend that and actually push for a much wider diversity and inclusivity, and none of these norms and averages to be made in this way. So back to my beginning, we're looking at the virtual physical world and how it's blending and how it's shifting our understanding of identity and collaborations and innovations. So I think I'll finish there to tell you that actually, we don't want to be alone like this in this interactive world. What we do need is to understand that even big business doesn't understand the ever-expanding digital ecosystem around us. These are complex patterns of interaction, but it is artists and creatives that can actually experiment with these layers of interwoven non-linear journeys, and are doing so, and look at our digital selves along our physical selves, and work to actually enable us to potentially have a really wonderful collaborative shared space of compassion and trust and empathy and joy, of positive action onwards together. And that should be the priority: personalizing digital intimacy and trust, enabling collective embodiment to work holistically with our collective intelligence, and creating this virtual physical blended experience and hybrid in many ways, which is positive for us, which is positive for our human sensory enhancement. And it's actually, I believe this is our own responsibility to do this. We're the living emotional beings and we create the tech. And this is what I call the Internet of Bodies. So I'll finish there, and I'm sorry if I've gone over. I don't think I have I? So, but I know I haven't left enough time.